Hello everyone and welcome to this video on modelling components in Fusion 360. In this particular video we're going to be modelling the tool block component that you can see on screen now. If you would like to follow along with this exercise you can find an engineering drawing for the component in the video description below. Okay, so before we get started let's think about the general approach that we're going to take when modelling this component. I can see that we have several very similar features which run around the top edges of the component, namely these indents here. So what I think I'm going to do for this particular component is create a single extrude feature for the main body of material of the component and then cut away the material to create one of these indents around the top. Then use a pattern feature to pattern that feature all the way across one edge of the component before finally using a mirror feature to mirror all of those indents across to the other side of the component. Okay, so let's get started now. First thing I'm going to do is create a new design by going to the New Design tab. And I need a new sketch, so I go to the Create Sketch button, and in this case I want to sketch on the ZX plane. For the purposes of this sketch I'm going to try and keep the origin of the component central with the body of material that I'm going to create. So what I want to do first of all is sketch in a line which represents the center of my component. So I go to my line tool and I'm going to sketch a single line vertically upwards, and it doesn't really matter how tall this line is, so I'm happy with that, so I can click OK. And what I want to do now is I want to turn this line to a construction line. So I do this by clicking on it, then right clicking and holding, and then going to normal/construction. What this means is that I can use this line to construct features within my sketch, but it won't appear, I won't be able to use it to create geometry such as extrudes or revolves, etc. Once I've done that, I can go to my 2-point rectangle tool and I can begin to sketch out rectangles which represent the main body of my component. So I'm going to sketch a rectangle for the main or the outside of the component, a rectangle for the central recess on the top, and a rectangle for the central recess on the bottom. Now these are all approximately the correct shape, but they're not the right size yet, so I'm going to go to my sketch dimension tool and I'm going to start dimensioning these in accordance with the engineering drawing. So I can tell from my engineering drawing that the main width of the component is 80mm, so I'm going to set this to 80. I can tell that the height of the component is 30mm. I know that the width of the central cutout feature is 30mm and that this is 20mm deep. I also know that the distance from the top of the component to the bottom of the cutout on the bottom of the component is 26mm and that the width is 12mm. Okay, so I have my sizes in now, but none of this geometry that I've sketched is constrained relative to each other. So what I need to use now is I need to use some sketch constraints in order to fully constrain this sketch. The first thing that I'm going to do is use the coincident constraint. So I pick the coincident constraint here, and I want to snap the bottom of my component. So this line, I want to snap it to the bottom edge here. Let's try that again. So I pick the bottom edge, and then the center of the coordinate system for my component. The next thing that I'm going to do is use a symmetry constraint. So I can pick the symmetry constraint button at the top, and what I want to do is I want to make all of these features symmetrical with that line that I sketched at the beginning. So for the outside of the component I'm going to pick this vertex, and then the center line. For the central cutout, this vertex, and again the center line, and then the same thing for the bottom cutout. And what I can see now is that all of my sketch lines have gone black, meaning that my sketch is fully constrained and I've got all of the information there that I need. So I can go to Finish Sketch. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is create an extrude feature for the main body of my component. So for that I go to Extrude, and I'm going to pick this particular bit of 2D geometry, and rather than extrude this on one side of the sketch I'm going to change this to a symmetric extrude feature. This is just to try and keep the primary coordinate system for the component close to the center of the component. I'm going to change the measurement to hole length, and I know that the hole length of this particular extrude needs to be 120mm as per the engineering drawing. I'm happy with that feature now, so I can press OK. And then the only other feature that I need on this main body of material are the two chamfer features that run along the bottom edges. So I go to modify and to chamfer, and I can pick these two edges, pick one, hold control, pick the other, and set the value to 4mm here. I know that this is a 45-degree chamfer, so I can leave the chamfer type as equal distance. I can press OK on that, and now the last thing I have to do one of the last things I have to do is create the indent features. For this, I'm going to create a new sketch. This time I'm going to sketch on the top face of the component, and I'm going to use a rectangle tool to make part of the indent geometry, and then I'm going to use a circle tool to make the other part. Now I want this circle to be on the midpoint of this particular line here, so if I hover close to the midpoint, we'll see that it snaps to the midpoint here, and then I can create a circle from the midpoint of that line to the edge of the rectangle. This indent looks approximately the right shape, but I need to set some distances here. So again, I go to my sketch dimension tool, and I dimension the width of this indent to be 12mm as per the drawing, and I dimension the distance from the edge of the component to be 16mm as per the engineering drawing. Now the last thing that I need to set is the height, or the length of the indent rather. So again, I can go to my dimension tool, and this time I just need to show my origin geometry, and I know that distance from the center of the component to the center of that circle there should be 30mm. Okay, so once again my sketch lines have all gone black. I know that this is a fully constrained sketch, and I can press finish sketch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an extrude feature which removes the material required to create that indent. So again, I go to extrude. This time I need to pick a couple of pieces of enclosed two-dimensional geometry, and I know that the depth of this indent feature is 8mm, so I set that accordingly. I need to make sure that my operation type is set to cut, so that I'm removing material from the existing body. That's done, so I can press OK. So now I have one indent, but I need to make many more of these. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pattern that indent. So I go to create, pattern, and rectangular pattern. I need to make sure that my pattern type is set to features, and I want to pick on that extrude feature that I've just created. Next thing I want to do is I want to pick a direction. So which direction do I want to pattern this feature in? So for this particular case, I want to pattern along this edge, which is the outer edge of the component. So I pick the directions button, and I pick an edge which represents that direction. Now straight away, Fusion will default to giving me 3 instances of this particular pattern. So I can grab the blue arrow and I can stretch those 3 instances out to wherever I want them to be. Now I have 2 choices here. I can set the distance type to be extent, or I can set it to spacing. So if I know the distance between the first and the last instance of this particular pattern feature, I would use extent, but in this case I know the distance between each pattern feature, so I'm going to set that to spacing. I know that I want 5 of these particular features, and I know that the distance between each of these is going to be 22mm, so I set this to 22. That all looks good, so I can press OK, and we can see that we've got all of those pattern features in there now. One of the last things I need to do is mirror these indent features across to the other side of the component. So again, I go to create, and this time I'm going to go to mirror. Again, I want the pattern type to be features, and I want to select both the pattern feature and the original extrude feature in the model timeline at the bottom of the window. I'm then going to go to select my mirror plane, and I want to pick this origin plane which runs through the center of my component. As soon as I do that, I'll be given a preview of what I'm going to create. That looks good, so I can press OK. And this gives me all of the indent features that I need. The very last thing that I need to do is I need to create the radii on this component. Now, I have a note on my engineering drawing saying that a 0.5mm radii need to be applied to all sharp corners. Now normally when I create a radii or a fillet, I would go to fillet, and then I would pick each individual edge that I want to fillet, and then I would set a value there. Obviously there are a lot of edges on this particular component, so we're going to do this slightly differently. I'm going to go to modify and then fillet. I'm then going to drag select around the entire component and set the value to be 0.5. What this will do is it will select every edge on the component and allow me to apply a fillet feature. Once I press OK, I've now created all the geometry required for that component. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will see you in the next video.